From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goodo.
Good Sunday morning. The Texas abortion ban was national news this week after the Texas Supreme Court overturned a lower court's ruling and stopped a North Texas woman from getting the medical procedure under the state's emergency exemptions. We're sitting down with one of her attorneys to talk about the ruling, but first, here are the three things you need to know in Texas politics. The Democratic and Republican parties in Travis County can't seem to agree on how the March primary should run, and there's concern it could affect voters. In Texas, primary elections are organized by the parties, and historically, the parties come to an agreement on the mechanics of the primary and send that to the clerk's office, which actually runs the primary elections. But during a virtual press conference Wednesday, Travis County Democrats said they should have finalized a contract last week, but Republicans are holding things up. They say Republicans don't want countywide polling, which allows voters to cast their ballots anywhere in the county instead of at a specific precinct location. And they say the Republicans want ballots to be hand counted. Democrats say a delay in an agreement affects the clerk's office ability to prepare for March. Now, the Travis County Republican Party tells KVUE they sent a draft contract to the Democrats last week that included countywide polling, but they didn't elaborate on the details of that proposal. If the parties don't come to an agreement, there's concern they would have to run the primaries separately. And because Texas has open primary voting, meaning voters pick which primary, Democrat or Republican, they want to vote in at the polls, there's really no guidelines for how that might work. And speaking of the primaries, the deadline for candidates to file to run for state and federal offices was Monday. Looking at the top of the ticket, 10 Democrats have filed to challenge Republican Texas U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. The primary election is March 5th. We're getting a better idea of just how much the impeachment trial of Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton cost taxpayers. $4.2 million. The Texas Tribune reports the House spent at least $3.7 million. Most of that went to high-profile attorney Rusty Hardin and his team. The House's bill may end up being even higher as more invoices from other attorneys come in. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick says the Senate spent about $435,000. He's been critical of the House's impeachment process and called for an audit after Paxton's acquittal in September. The Texas ban on abortion is getting national attention once again. Under the law, doctors are only allowed to perform abortions if a woman's life is at risk or if she is at risk of losing a major bodily function. Doctors across the state have said they don't know when to pull that trigger and aren't willing to risk the consequences up to life in prison. On Monday, the Texas Supreme Court issued an opinion overturning a lower court's ruling that okayed an abortion for a North Texas woman. This morning, we're hearing from that woman's attorney, Austin Kaplan. You know, we want to talk about the Supreme Court opinion that came down earlier this week involving Kate Cox's case. And I think when we look at the headlines, oftentimes what we're seeing is the, state overturns the lower court ruling or the state sides with Ken Paxton. But when you look at the actual opinion, what the Supreme Court justices actually wrote, there's more of an overarching opinion, I would think, that sort of says judges shouldn't be involved in this.
Yeah, the case is a one-of-a-kind case, and I would say that the opinion is a one-of-a-kind opinion. We understand that this is perhaps the first case since before Roe v. Wade where an individual pregnant woman who needed a medical procedure had to go to court to seek the right to do that. And Kaplan Law Firm is proud to be counsel for Kate Cox and her family in seeking her medical care in this case. What we know from the case is that even with a judge's order, the state is not going to let at least this procedure go forward. And ultimately, the Supreme Court's order, the one thing I can tell you for certain about that order is that it vacated the district court's TRO and in effect did not allow the doctor to perform the procedure in Texas.
Sure. Some of the language in the order from the court sort of said doctors, not judges, should be making these decisions. Talk to us about the reasoning behind what the Supreme Court, what is actually in the opinion.
Yeah, it is really hard to understand because in a case like this, the doctor did make the decision. The doctor decided it was appropriate to proceed under the medical exception and provide the health care, which in this case was an abortion. We sought a temporary restraining order to allow the doctor to do that safely, given the abortion bans in Texas. And there are essentially three different bans, three different laws banning abortion. The court in Travis County said yes, and the Supreme Court ultimately issued an order that effectively said no. So what I can tell you about the Kate Cox case is that procedure at that time was not permitted to happen in Texas.
20 women, 2 doctors who suing the state of Texas because they were denied abortions that they say they really needed. We're very familiar with some of those cases and really some of the horror stories that have come out of women getting sepsis, being in the hospital, things of that nature because they were not able to get that procedure done. Do you think this opinion gives you any insight to that ruling, that future opinion that's going to come down?
It's a great question, and the answer is we don't know. We simply don't know. The Supreme Court is expected to issue a decision in the Zarowski case by no later than June. We hope earlier, maybe in the early spring, and we hope that the decision will provide the clarity necessary so that doctors can proceed under the medical exception and give health care to pregnant mothers who desperately need it. But we saw, and the reason I think there was so much outcry about Kate Cox's case is we saw a family that really needed this done so that they could move forward and have another baby that would survive and so that they would have the family they want. And they sought to have this done and they were denied ultimately by the state of Texas. And I think that's why people are so upset about what happened in this case, because it was happening live and we saw it fail. We're proud to have tried to get this family the help they needed. And we're hopeful that in the Zarowski case, we will set the precedent for all future women in Texas that need this care and their doctors that they can act appropriately.
I think, one of the things that was really interesting, what we saw this week, even we had conservative commentators say that the case in Texas really goes, almost too far, that there's no compassion for mothers and these infants who potentially are going to die painful deaths. It's tough. It's a tough.
I mean, the truth of the matter is no mother should ever be forced by the state to go through the death of the baby in their own arms when everyone knows that's what's going to happen. It's their decision.
Right.
If someone wants to do that and they want to go through that process, that's their right. But if someone doesn't want to do that, that's their right too. And I think that's why we take the position, that reproductive rights are civil rights. And in this case, we're talking about human rights, just basic human dignity and rights.
The Supreme Court opinion in the Kate Cox case has drawn national attention, including the attention of President Joe Biden. He released a statement that says, in part, quote, "No woman should be forced to go to court or flee her home state just to receive the health care she needs." But that is exactly what happened in Texas, thanks to Republican elected officials, and it is simply outrageous. This should never happen in America, period, end quote. That's Texas This Week.